Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Rivalry CS YouTube channel. I'm obviously the host, Richard Lewis, and today we're going to be doing another interview. It's with somebody I've interviewed before. It's with somebody I have a lot of respect for, but it's esports awards season, and we have lots of fun talking about who's allowed to be nominated and who isn't, and which journalists are okay and which ones aren't. So we thought we'd get DK on. It's been a while, so it's been about 6 months since we talked, and we'd go over it. So we'll start there, man. How you been?
I've been great, good. Enjoying that I get to do this a little more full time now. I mean, not full time, but it's like up until July, I had spent every waking moment outside of the work I would be doing, non-relating to Counter-Strike, to now getting to do it when I would normally be working. So it's been a big change for the better. I'm enjoying it wholeheartedly, and it's just crazy that I honestly look back and don't know how I was able to do as much as I did while doing that, because it took so much time, commute, all that. So yeah, it's just been great. I've been enjoying that more than anything else.
Yeah, that's one of the things, I used to feel as well. Like when I was younger, I was like, I was looking back and I was like, Jesus Christ, I was like juggling 3 jobs. Like, how the fuck did I ever do that?
Well,
Like,
you had it harder though. It's like at least I
sure.
can make somewhat of an income. Like you're talking, you were doing all that.
Yeah, well, that's why we had to have the 2 other jobs. We had
Exactly.
we had the journalism, we had the actual job in esports that paid, and we had a real job.
Mm.
But I'm glad, because one of the things I was worried about that might be happening with you was, you did talk a lot about it, that when the jobs, because obviously you're an engineer, when the jobs in that field kind of became more prolific and more interesting, there was a very good chance you were just going to kind of walk away from doing esports reporting, because, as you've made very clear on multiple occasions, it's something you enjoy, it's something you do well, but it might not be the final destination on your particular road.
Yeah, for sure. It was always like something I would consider, right? Because I do consider my, like, as much as like being an engineer, unless you're like super passionate about it, it's a slog. It's so slow, and it's can be so uninteresting. Even if you are working on something that is like a cool project, you're such a micro piece of the puzzle that it gets very old very quick for me. And so regardless though, there are so many opportunities that can open up, especially once you get your foot in the door into something like that I worked on. Yeah, I always kind of had it in my head that I could just end up going that route after I did the Counter-Strike stuff for a while. But as things moved on and things got further along and to what I do now, I couldn't overlook how much I enjoyed the work, as well as just the other things that were with it, like just the general help that you can give people in the community behind the scenes. Like I just found myself falling more and more in love with that. I said, at least I want to give this a full-time run at things. And then, if later down the line I move on to something else in esports, or, back to engineering, whatever it is, I wanted to give this like a full go and experience that. And it's been great so far.
So what does that really entail? Because one of the things that I've been intrigued by is, like, you seem to be a little bit ahead of the curve in terms of figuring out the marketing and the monetization aspects of being an independent journalist. Like, obviously, it's taken me like 10 years, I'd say, realistically, to sort of build up the platform I have, where it's like, I can be a freelancer anywhere, or I can sit down and turn on my Twitch stream and just read news stories to my audience, and there's some financial gain there. And I've noticed that you're doing that very quickly. You seem to have cottoned onto it. And I see you doing your streams now where you're answering live questions, and clips get posted to Reddit, and more followers come across to your Twitch account. And I think there's something there. I honestly think that's kind of like the future of where we need to take esports journalism to a certain degree. I think the idea of like getting stories live and getting the insights into journalists and having them kind of break down rumors and say what's true, what isn't. I think there's a lot of value in that, and you don't see it in traditional news reporting so much.
Yeah, I mean, it's more, I mean, it always begins with like just a genuine passion for what I'm doing. But yeah, like it's tough for me because I do think like the written word and the reporting itself is like it's historic. Like it's something I never want to disappear and I always want to still do. But yeah, working in some of the things like the live content or video, whatever else, it's something that, yeah, I focused on, and it's just kind of, I guess, playing the crowd in a way, right? Like I look at, you know, as much as Reddit has its like terrible aspects, it's something like if you're going to succeed or you want to at least accomplish something when it comes to at least esports reporting, like you have to try to, if you can, use Reddit to the best of your power, like the best you can, because it can be an incredible tool. And it sucks to that a story can literally make or break how well it does, depending on if you can get on Reddit and you do it the right time of day or whatever. But yeah, it ultimately comes back to me just trying to recognize like who it is and what the audience is that is watching Counter-Strike and what they like to see, and trying to play that, I guess, in a way, but still staying true to myself and doing what I enjoy doing. So it's kind of, I'm trying to mix in the best of both worlds when I'm doing that, I would say.
It's very weird because it leads to a kind of strange thought process when it comes to like the, you know, how you handle things editorially, because, you know, you have to, like you say, there's the initial considerations. Is it newsworthy? How newsworthy? What time should I put this out? You know, what kind of audience are we looking for here? Who is this story aimed at? Who needs to know? They're all the basics. But then when you start factoring in social media and community interaction, it can get really weird, because there's no doubt about it. You want as many people to see your work as possible. You know, that applies to content creators and journalists alike, especially if you believe the story has value to the community that it supposedly serves. But then you get into the situation where if you've been antagonistic to certain communities, there will be hardcore enclaves of people that would rather not get the truth, rather not get the story, because it's coming from you, somebody they actively dislike. And with social media tools, they can be very easily manipulated to essentially make it so no one sees a story because of a few bad actors. So that has to honestly be a consideration. You know, I wouldn't recommend handling yourself like how I have done on Twitter and just arguing with everybody and like zero flex at all. There's probably a lot more to be gained from pandering a little bit, even if it's not really what you believe inside.
Yeah, I'll be straight up with you. I absolutely, it is considered pandering what I do. Like there are so many, like, don't get me wrong, I admire how much use and people like you stick to your guns and will always voice what you believe. You'll always act, you know, with your own best interest in mind, no one else's. Like I have the utmost respect for it, but I yeah, I will be directly honest with, and you know, upfront, that I definitely have reserved some of my opinions. Like there's plenty of times where I think some roster move is terrible, and when I maybe at first off, when I first, you know, started doing this and was like, oh, I'm just going to mention my opinion, I don't give a fuck. Sorry if I'm not supposed to swear, but
no, you can. This is perfectly fine.
I know it's for rivalry, but whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, at first I would just like, I'm just going to say my opinion. And then I started to realize, you know, not only are there better people to listen for like Counter-Strike opinion, but I just noticed over time that when I started to reduce the amount of opinion I would give, that would obviously infuriate, you know, whatever fans of a certain team or whatever, that overall the content would do better, but you would just, you would earn more fans that way in a sense, and which ultimately and indirectly results in more support for your work and stuff. And so it's an internal battle, because when I'm on a stream or something and I'm asked, that's when I'll be direct. But when it comes to my work or where I directly, you know, put out and support my work, say on Twitter, I've definitely reduced and almost eliminated most of my opinion, unless it's not going to directly harm someone or directly, you know, influence fans in a way to help that. And it's still, I'm conflicted about it, because I don't want to appear fake or anything. I just tend to reserve judgment for other people, but also to just make sure that it doesn't, you know, cut off someone. Or, you know, I always wonder like, oh, if I said this, you know, as much as I like to tell it how it is myself, I don't want to reduce the chance for, you know, a great interview I could have with a player or a team, you know, down the line. Like, say if I'm at an event and an interview is refused to me because of some opinion, you know, you never know what someone's going to hold against you. I'm always trying to play the long game, but nonetheless, I still admire so much people who stick to their guns more in that sense, like yourself.
Yeah, it's a tough line to walk. And again, you know, I think if I could go back and do some things differently, there was a period where, you know, again, because the internet was still kind of developing and we didn't really have fandoms or kind of a concept of what fandoms were like. And how crazy it could get because of social media. Sort of, you know, fandoms had always existed, right? But without
Yeah.
the internet, without social media, they've got no access to you, essentially. So when I started writing about, you know, and that's essentially what any esports community is, it's a fandom. Um, you know, and they were coming after me. I think what I probably should have done, looking back, is kind of, you know, not been as combative, but it's in my nature. So it's very hard to kind of, okay, this person's telling me to kill myself. I can just block and ignore this and it'll go away. Or I can argue with this dude and say what he's saying is outrageous and fight back. And, you know, I was always doing that at the start. And it basically is what set me up to be this divisive figure. You know, every esports community I went into, controversy, 50% of the people saying it's good he's here, he's going to expose all the bullshit. The other 50% saying he's an asshole, fuck him. So you end up in this like weird world where it's like, that if that 50% is the one that's awake when I put a story out, the 50% that hates me, the other 50% don't get to see the story. And you know, a little bit more pandering and a little bit more political savvy would have definitely, I think, given me a bigger audience. I think I would have a much bigger following now because it would have, you know, and it would have shut down all of the League of Legends drama as well, probably because I would have pandered to the mods and let them have their little power fantasy or whatever, you know. So it definitely led to a lot of mistakes. So I think for sure the way you seem to be handling things right now is probably the way to go, even though it probably eats you up inside having to do it.
Yeah, I always think about like maybe one day, you know, when, you know, I don't have any like plans or anything, but like let's say, you know, eventually I realize that okay, the people who support my work, like I'm not going to kill them off by starting to voice my opinion again or more often than I have in a, you know, previously. But I do think about it like maybe one day once it feels like we get to that point, maybe I'll start doing it because then I just won't care as much or things will feel safer in a way. But then again, I still like when I think about it now, and I guess another aspect to it is like I still feel like even at this point, I don't think I've earned the right or the privilege to, I mean, everyone deserves an opinion or everyone's entitled to an opinion, but I still don't view myself as someone who's earned my stripes enough in the industry to express my opinion on every matter, even though obviously I'm entitled to one. But I still think I have more work to do personally, and also there's so many other people that are more educated and more experienced in the industry that people should be focusing on instead. So if I can be one less voice on most occasions, then I would rather just take a step back because I'd rather hear from someone else rather than myself. And it seems like in most cases.
So, with all of that in mind, I mean, how are you enjoying transitioning to being like kind of a more public facing figure? Like before, you know, you're just a byline, you're just a name on a page. Now I see you out there, you're doing more and more interviews, you're doing more and more talk shows, you're doing live streams, you're appearing on podcasts. This is kind of an evolution of where you were originally positioned in the community, where I think, you know, you were a very much outside of that initial video that kind of launched you. Uh, Generally, you were a guy that did the writing, and you weren't so much the complete package in terms of, you know, go on a show, do some live appearances. You know, I got a social media presence. You know, here's where you can find my articles. How are you adapting to that? Because it is a different discipline. It opens you up to a different type of criticism, a different type of vitriol.
Yeah, I mean, I guess because I've done it over such, I guess it feels to me a long period. It's only a few years, right? But
Mm.
since I also worked at the time, so it wasn't always that I didn't want to do more stuff like that. It was mainly a time constraint more than anything. But still, yes, it's so much different, and you just have to be so much more on your feet. I mean, if you're just writing stuff, right, you got an editor watching over your shoulder, you have people picking up on things that you might not have noticed, but when you're doing things live like that, you really do have to consider about what it is you're saying, or the way something can come across, especially in this day and age, unfortunately. You never know who's going to get offended at something you might say. And so, yeah, it doesn't affect me too much. Like, I guess I've been enjoying it because it's something newish for me that I'm learning. Because I never, originally when I did that first video mentioned, like, I never envisioned any of this happening. I never had a plan. I never thought, it's just kind of like circumstance that led up to starting everything. So it's just been an adventure for myself more than anything that I've enjoyed. And thankfully, I don't know if it's luck or the way I approach things, I haven't been met with too much backlash or vitriol. And I mean, there are times where, like, I do report something, and I even will talk about it on my stream and explain to everyone how things went. And even though it didn't happen, like, what I reported at the time was definitely the case. And you do have those angry fans. I guess I've just been met with some of that more directly in a couple of occasions. But other than that, it's been enjoyable and nothing too crazy. I haven't been met with some of the things. For some reason, people like me. I still don't know what it is yet. That leads.
It's been a pretty good turnaround. I think there was definitely a period where I think it was kind of the new kid on the block, maybe, or maybe it was when the story started getting to a certain scale.
Yeah.
There did seem to be this weird, almost combative kind of element where, your story would go up on Reddit and I'd just read comments that were just like delusional. And, people saying, oh, another load of DK bullshit. He's got these stories wrong and blah, blah. And I'm like, but this isn't true. Like, his record's almost unprecedented. Sure, there's been a few missteps. I mean, the other thing that we never talk about is that it is super rare to find journalists with, like, even 99% accuracy. Like, what, they never got any element of any story wrong. I always talk about my 100% record, but I'm pretty sure there's probably been one or two where maybe a detail hasn't been right, or and you just don't get called out about it because the bulk of the story is true. The 100% accuracy expectation is esports is insane to me, and it doesn't exist anywhere else. It's like, you go to sports papers, they can print any old shit and do whatever's gonna, oh, I talked to a fucking person who makes the tea at a sports club, and he saw, like, Antonio Brown, jogging around the block, so he's gonna join. It was just like, and that's a report, and it goes out, and it's just fodder, and it's just nonsense, and everyone forgets about it the next day, picks up the paper, reads the sports stories again. We're held up to an unbelievable, expectation of accuracy, which is fine. I'd rather have it than not. But I've definitely seen this weird, like I said, this weird kind of belief where it was getting to a stage where it was, like, incredibly frustrating, just kind of like as a bystander witnessing it, because I'm like, I don't understand where it's coming from. And it seemed to be there every time you put a story out.
Yeah, it was. That's why, like, yeah, I'm thankful in a way that that happened in a time, like you mentioned, where I was pretty much just doing the writing. If it was more on a direct live basis, like, say, people were coming into a chat on my stream or comments all over videos on content that I do now, yeah, it would have been even harder to deal with. And I mean, I've learned since then, definitely, like, the biggest turning point for me was realizing how much, at least in my case, the vocal minority, how small they actually are. Because when you see them and there's, like, a quarter or half the comments in a Reddit thread of only 30, 40 comments, so you really do have to take a step back and look at, like, the total amount of people that read the article compared to the amount that actually said something negative about it. How small it actually is. It's, if you don't actually put that into context, it can really wear on you. And it did at first. It did back then. I've learned so much now to where, like, I don't care what anyone says anymore, whatever. But then it definitely was something I struggled with. Like, it was, I don't know why. It was just like, even though you tell yourself, like, who cares, just do good work, like, all that matters is the process. Your editor knows everything about this is A1. It's perfect. He did everything right. The report's right, whatever. And things just didn't turn out the way that they were originally planned. It would still get to me. And I guess, I don't know if it's just experience or that maybe finally dying off, that eventually also, I would say just having a lot of positive reinforcement from people in the community helped too. But yeah, I'm thankful in a way, even though I think I would have made it through just fine, that it happened earlier on when I wasn't doing so much compared to now. Because it's, if you're getting it on all fronts, man, it could definitely be demotivating for sure.
Yeah, nothing to do about that, bro.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, basically the the situation I think you found yourself in is pretty pretty interesting. I think you've definitely rode the storm and you've handled it in a way that perhaps had our positions been reversed, I probably wouldn't have handled it as well as you. But there is one thing that definitely kind of stood out to me, and that is the way that the community does play favorites. And I think we saw this with this recent story, right, with the whole Team Liquid roster move, and it was very bizarre. So for those that didn't catch it, me and Duncan were doing an episode of By the Numbers. It's a great CS podcast. If you've not watched it, guys should check it out. It's sick. We're coming up to 150 episodes. Like, I don't even know how we've been doing it for that long.
Yeah,
but whatever.
congrats, man.
Yeah, it's fucking wild, isn't it? But anyway, so me and Duncan were like saying there's something off with Team Liquid. They keep like choking in games, they keep throwing leads, they're underperforming at these tournaments. Since they come back from the player break, someone looks off. And I noticed NAF's been emo on Twitter, NAFly, and he's tweeting things out. So me and Duncan did a little theory craft that, maybe something's wrong there. And if it
as
was,
you usually do.
Yeah, because like it's a sports show essentially. So yeah, you shoot the shit. You say who should play where, and which players should teams get, and this guy's in free agency, and we've always tried to treat it like a mainstream kind of sports podcast like that. So we did this theory craft where we said, Automatic would probably want to leave Cloud9. They're having a terrible time of it right now. He's still one of the best players in NA. He could be available. And that was it. And we just moved on, and the sentiment we ended the segment on was, but don't make a change because, you Team Liquid. The next day, we saw this, the next day or two, we saw this report come out where basically everything we'd said on By the Numbers was like in this report. And it was like one of those moments for me where I'm like, okay, did I know this was happening and like mind fuck myself and talk about it on By the Numbers? Or am I like God? Like, did I will this into existence just by the power of my brain? Like, of all the things to will into existence as well, I can't get my 6-pack abs back and fucking millions in the bank. I will Automatic go into fucking Team Liquid of all things. But I was like watching it unfold, and this story felt very different. Now, the journalist that put it out there is a guy called Will Land, who works over at Rush B Media. And is a fairly junior journalist, but has had some stories and hasn't got any ones wrong to my memory. So it was really weird. And then what felt different about this was everyone was saying it was bullshit right from the get go. Like, not like, oh, Team Liquid, it's all lies. But then you're hitting up people in NA and you're talking to your regular sources and they go, yeah, this is totally happening. It was just like everyone was just like, what the fuck? Like, no, like definitely not. They're all under contract. And long story short, the story turned out to be complete bunk, like absolute, just a falsehood. And the community didn't seem to give that guy any shit at all. Now, and I just think, like, if this was DK, if this was me, if this was Duncan, if this was almost any other journalist, it was a really weird kind of forgiveness and clemency that they kind of showed there, which definitely isn't in keeping with how they react usually.
Yeah. That was so weird to me, especially me considering like the couple of reports that got me the most shit during that period where people were always coming in and brigading somewhat, not fully, but a little bit to the Reddit threads or whatever, or tweets of reports. Like, I had never done anything anywhere close. The most that had happened with any of mine was like, Navi was targeting Angel, but then it didn't work out. They couldn't get him from Hellraiser, so they had to move on to someone else. And then obviously to everyone else, it appeared that the report was wrong because it didn't unfold. But this was the first time out of anyone, including myself, that had reported something that I had had so many people reach out to me unprovoked to say, what is this? This is not happening. And then as well as how easy it was for me to contact everyone I know in North America and have them tell me, yeah, dude, like, just trust me. For a fact, this isn't happening. I've never had that. And so to have that much of a confirmation so quickly, I'm talking 10 plus people telling me within minutes of that report coming out that this isn't true, to have so little backlash, it was shocking. Like, I don't know, like, the optimist in me wanted to assume that we're just past that point, at least in Counter-Strike, of shitting on journalists, even if, you know, it appears they got something wrong or they actually did, that now there isn't this expectation of 100% accuracy, or there's just something special about this guy that he gets a free pass. I don't know what it is, but yeah, you know, I don't hold that against anyone, but I would be lying if I said I wasn't surprised, or, you know, if I didn't note it as in like, oh, I wonder why that didn't happen with me when my reports weren't even misses. Like, that's so, yeah, it was definitely something I noticed. And, it's just, yeah, it's a little weird. I kind of wish I knew why that this case is a little bit different.
Yeah, and obviously I'm not saying I give this guy a load of shit.
No.
I mean, everything about this was kind of fucked up though, because obviously it comes at a time when they're under tremendous pressure anyway, and it's like, you know, if NAF was the kind of paranoid type, if they didn't have like a cohesive team unit, which they certainly seem to have so far. I mean, you know, a little bit emo, and things aren't going particularly well on the server. But, you know, they don't seem to have turned on each other or be critical of each other or snapping at each other in game, you know, from what we can see externally. But if NAF was the kind of paranoid type and they didn't have a good relationship, he might think, well, one of the players leaked this. They are going to replace me. And now he's got to carry that, you know, into a tournament, you know, potentially thinking he's playing for his life. It's extra pressure. It's like every time you put a story out, there is this like domino effect of how it affects everybody. And in this case, I thought, honestly, like, I did feel a little bit sorry for fucking Team Liquid, which I never thought I would say, because they have a terrible track record with journalists. But this was one of those stories where I think, you know, if I was to show any upcoming journalists in the scene, I would point to this and say, this is the kind of impact things can have when you do get a story wrong, and you know, and it's a big one.
Yeah, I said kind of something similar on my stream. Like, this is exactly the reason why it is so important to just be 100%, or at least as close to 100% certain, or if you're not 100% certain, just sitting on this, that the ramifications it can have, which I was told, I said it on my stream, like, this actually did have an effect on more than one of their players.
Oh,
like, it absolutely impacted them. They're sitting there now all looking at each other, pointing fingers, like, is there something going on? Like, it 100% legitimately, I was told by multiple people, it had an impact on them, to the point where, yeah, their manager did have to come out and say, like, look, I know people deny things, and look, we normally don't say anything, but guys, this got to stop. And so this is one of those reasons, like, this is why you have to be certain. Like, this isn't, here's the thing, like, I did, you know, I said the same things about the author of the report. Like, look, don't give him a whole bunch of crap. He's going to learn from this. He's someone who probably knew before everyone that, yeah, he messed up or could have approached it differently, whatever, even if he followed whatever his protocol was. Something needed to change, or you need to change who you're trusting regardless. But one of the things I didn't mention is, like, look, it's the way I got sent logs of, like, the guys who are putting together the story. Okay. And one thing that struck me is, like, it almost appeared as if, and I don't know these people, but it almost appeared to me as if they treated this as if it was some sort of, like, game, like, little hobby, fun game, like, joking around. Hey, you should just just publish it. Just publish it. Who cares? Like, like, this was one of the best teams in the world this year. This is their livelihoods. Like, like, they're already not having a good time. And it, you know, if there's a chance that this could be wrong, like, you're treating it as if it's some little game. Like, it was embarrassing to me. It was the word that kept coming to me when I was talking about it, is I feel embarrassed, even though I wasn't directly responsible. I'm not affiliated with any of those guys. I didn't report anything about this. I am embarrassed a little bit because, you know, I still work in that side of the industry when it comes to reporting, that you can't treat this like some little game. Like, we're talking about professional players, one of the best teams, their livelihoods, their careers, to to affect them, it's disrespectful in a way. And so I'm a little ashamed on that front, even though there's nothing I could do.
Yeah.
But I just, if there's any advice I could give, to people who will do it in the future, reporting or that are doing it now, like, you really got to treat this with respect. And, yeah, at the end of the day, it's video games, but I take this shit seriously. I take my job seriously. Like, I wish, like, obviously no one would ever see the logs of when I'm talking to an editor about a story I'm going to publish, but it's serious. Like, we're not joking around about like, should we just publish it, guys? Should we just publish it? Like, do you think it could be wrong? Like, no, it's serious. Like, you got to, it's sensitive information at the end of the day. And I wish that, I hope that doesn't get, lost when it's all said and done.
So, I think overall, though, kind of little wobbles aside, I think we've been doing pretty good overall in esports journalism. I always like to sit back and kind of, look at the lay of the land about once a year and see where we are in terms of people who are active. What's been interesting this year is we've had external journalists from mainstream games publications. And traditionally, those guys don't know the space, and their stories are garbage, and their angles are garbage, and they don't have a source network. And it's like they only tackle the same kind of tepid story over and over again. But we had Cecilia D'Anastasio come in. She's the Kotaku journalist who broke all the Riot Games stuff. So that was really big. And she should have been on the awards shortlist, by the way. And I think we've had some new people emerging. I think there's like people who've been around a long time, like beat reporters and like hard grinders, like Dustin Steiner coming through and getting some recognition, and Ashley Kang's had like a breakout with her League of Legends interviews and stuff. So I think in general, I think the type of story we're breaking is actually really big. We've endemically, we've broken some huge stuff. And not just that, I think, as well, like, I think some of the types of coverage we're doing, like, I'm glued to legal documents these days because every motherfucker's in a lawsuit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like everyone's suing everyone because the money's here now. And it's like I'm learning something that I'd never really done before. And that's kind of almost like how to be like a legal reporter. I'm learning what words mean and how some words mean something different in plain colloquial English to legalese. And I'm getting back to a point where I'm kind of like learning some new stuff, and it's testing my brain cells again, which is great. I think the industry's matured a lot, and I think the type of work we're doing, I think it really holds up. When I look over at games journalists in general, I look at the very poor standard they've set. I'm immensely proud of actually what we've got going on in esports.
Yeah, I am too. Definitely. That's why I talk about it in that way that I want it to be treated, everyone to treat it as if it's a very professional thing, because we're doing great work. I think the fact that we're held to such a high level, obviously it has its downsides to it, but like I view a lot of what the journalism that we do as some of the highest in all forms, even though I don't pay attention to much outside of esports or sports journalism in itself. I think the quality of work and just everything that's here now, and it's weird because I still don't feel like, I don't personally feel qualified or someone has put in enough work to like judge or be a voice of authority on that. But I've never had, especially since streaming and just, I would say, the second half of this year, so many people reach out to me and say they want to either write about esports, Counter-Strike, whatever, or do some kind of reporting, whatever. I've had so many to where like I can't keep up with the DMs I get of people like, how do I get started? I want to work in this. I want to do this. I want to do that. And even like I tell them like, look, I'm not the best person because I still view myself as someone that's learning. Like, I've been doing this since only 2016. I'm an engineer by trade who has to write technical documents on a 7th grade reading level that's required so that you don't confuse wording. Like, I'm learning here too, even though I did do well in writing, say in school or whatever, which I don't think means much, but I still consider myself learning. So for that many people to reach out to me, even, I just think overall it kind of, it means we're going in a great direction. And I think if we're this many people wouldn't be reaching out if we weren't producing a good product at the end of the day. So yeah, I fully agree there, and I'm excited. Yeah, I enjoy learning the new things that I get to learn just as much, especially now that I have more time as well.
you've been thinking about maybe doing some, kind of anchor work, I guess, because I know this, like, obviously we got the Do Not Peak studios are kind of opening up now, and they're looking to make some content. I have no idea what that would be. Neither me nor Scott or Jason by the time even sit down and really talk about stuff. But
Yeah.
but I think there's definitely room for a kind of polished news show, maybe just for CS, because I always think those shows where they try and be like Sports Center and they cover everything, I think they always fail. And I think it's, what's your audience there? Someone who loves all these sports simultaneously. They don't
Mm.
really exist. They're like fucking unicorns. So I think I think maybe like a CS focus show with like some pre-recorded features once a week, and I could see you scrub up pretty nice. I could see you sitting in a shirt and a sports blazer and sitting down and reading the news, off an auto cue or breaking some stories and stuff. Is that anything you've ever thought about?
Yeah, I've definitely considered it, right? I remember actually, I think it was like one of the first things that I was offered, like before I was barely even writing. I think I was just doing some YouTube stuff when I'm talking the very beginning. I can't remember who it was, but someone offered me to move somewhere and do something kind of similar to that. And I even considered it then. Moving's not something I'm willing to do, and I don't particularly like to travel too much, but like I would definitely consider it if it was the right thing. Even just going, on a temporary basis to do something, like absolutely, I would consider it, because I wholeheartedly agree. Like, not only do I think we have a need for some kind of show like that, but even just, I think we have a need for like, the NBA Tonight type shows that you see, like that are outside of games, or before events, that there's a desk where you bring just people on, whether it be people from talent or you bring some players and you're outside or wherever. I think the whole flow of just the same event every week with the same production style every week with the host and a desk and comment, even though all those guys do all the work, amazing work, and they're great at what they do, like there's definitely a spot to shake things up for a dedicated, news style show, or just something else that you can add to shake things up when it comes to events. So yeah, I haven't had any opportunities obviously presented to me, but I would absolutely listen if something like that were on the horizon. Absolutely, for sure.
And then the other thing, of course, is kind of event work, right? Because
Yeah.
I think that's a distinct possibility. I think obviously you can definitely handle yourself with an interview. I see lots of people doing the kind of sideline interviews now. We've got, when Frankie's doing the DreamHack events and she's down at courtside, you know what I mean? Like talking about what's going on and reactions in the games and moments. I actually like that, by the way. I think that's an unexplored area we should probably do more of in esports in general. But I think there's definitely room for you to kind of even maybe slot into event talent, right? A lot of people that were kind of like journalists and writing journalists and print journalists ended up doing it. I'm one of them. I ended up doing it. So is that something as well you've maybe thought about, like getting on the kind of open circuit for talent?
Less as much so, just because I'm such a homebody. Like I really like, yeah, I do love a good Counter-Strike event. I love going obviously to majors and big events too. And, things like Cologne are on my list that I haven't done yet, obviously, just to attend, right. To watch. Cause I am wholeheartedly a fan of the game. But that's something I've I've been offered, different things at different times, and, in history, like ESO Pro League was an opportunity presented to me at one point when they were still online, and different things like that. And I did turn them down, but it's more just because I see some of the travel these guys do and the way that they just kill themselves, that like, if I were to ever do it, like I wouldn't say never, never's a long time. I would definitely consider it. But it'd be less as much, not only because I would worry that, my work for, say, a specific tournament organizer, I wouldn't want that to have an effect on the reporting I could do in the future or at any point. That would be my first go-to. But the second is just, I see these guys with the travel, and I wish the landscape was in a way that they could take some time off without worrying about, losing their grasp on their position in the talent pool. So it's, that's not something I would ever worry about because I wouldn't be doing it a lot anyway. But I just think about it less as much just because I enjoy what I'm doing now so much. But I would consider it if it was presented to me again. It's something that I probably would definitely want to try just to see.
Mm. So I wanted to pick your brains a little bit about, kind of just some general stuff that's been going on in the scene. And, I think this is probably something that I want to do more of. Like when I have like journalists on, I ask them about journalism and not much else. And yeah, have a commentator on, you ask them about commentary and you don't really ask them about anything that's kind of going on, in terms of big stories, right? And, I want to try and get everybody's opinions because I think, your opinion's valid and people will be interested in it on a few of the things that have kind of been breaking over the past few days. So I mean, the first thing is obviously this big evil geniuses story. You actually broke that, right? Was
Yeah.
that you? Yeah. So I mean, that's like, again, that's a fucking huge story. That's like one of the stories of the year in Counter-Strike right there. Seems to me incredible duality is going on right now because on the one hand, I'm being told by some organizations Counter-Strike isn't profitable. And therefore we don't want to support it. And then on the other hand, I'm seeing other companies coming in and going, man, we really want to be involved in Counter-Strike at all costs. And it seems really bizarre to me that like I say, NRG are like, look, we've got to let a player go. We had to let the team go. It was a good offer. We can't do anything about it. Meanwhile, Evil Geniuses believe they got a great deal. So very strange kind of situation. So I wanted to pick your brains just a little bit about, first of all these big brands that are coming in, Turn of Evil Geniuses, OG, but more importantly, why do you think it's this constant state of flux that some orgs are moving away because they like the franchise thing and some people are coming in because they like what we offer in the open tournament circuit?
I don't know, man. It's like, I think it's funny how so many, like, it's like the new favorite word for like these orgs, some of them is like, it's not profitable, or, from a monetary standpoint, it's the worst esport, but there's all these orgs still want in, right? So it's, I don't know if it's like the orgs with experience who've had a team or multiple teams saying that it's not profitable. And then it's the teams like OG who haven't had a team in CSGO yet, who are saying like, we want a team and we got one and that was a great deal and we're excited and we can't wait. 100 Thieves is another name, obviously, that say they want to come in too. So it's, I don't know. I can't put my finger on directly why the spectrum's so wide, and it's like, there's so many on each side saying the opposite thing almost. But I do think for some reason, maybe a lot of it, to me, it seems like it's just like comparing Counter-Strike to all these other esports, which I really hate when it happens, because I think Counter-Strike is so unique in its own aspect that, sure, we have the open market, but just everything about it to me is unique. And maybe that's just because I'm a homer or I'm biased because that's the only game I really care about. But I just think it just gets compared too easily to these other models that maybe, I don't know, maybe it's like investors that are kind of have an influence on them, but I can't put my finger on it just yet. And I think it's just a lot of differing experiences all are coming out, and we're kind of to the point where, a bunch of money's here now, but then there's a lot of guys who like thought that, okay, we're in early and we're going to get a big payoff, who haven't got their big partnership like a Complexity has with the Cowboys. They're looking for that and it's not coming. So I don't know if it's just like an opportunistic reason from one side or the other, but I can't put my finger on it just yet. But I find it comical that so many people are saying the opposite thing almost every single day.
Yeah, and like I say, very strange when you consider that not only do we have some brands that you're like, well, surely they must see something, these we're not talking about poorly run organizations, on people new to the space. We're talking about people that have already attained success in the esports field coming into CS. But then you also see what's going on with ESL and they're revamping, obviously, Face It, ECS. And we're now creating these huge sprawling tournament circuits with millions of prize money up for grabs, huge sponsors associated with it. It just seems to me that it's like, if there was really no money there, we would be setting ourselves up for a massive fall. That would be, dare I say, Overwatch-esque, in the sense that if one
I
of
like that comparison.
yeah, because if
Yeah.
not saying it will fail, but if it does, the amount of money that's been wasted is
Yeah.
such a vast sum.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it could really negatively impact the industry. So what do you make of these leagues and everything, and kind of how that fits in the landscape?
Yeah, I don't know. It's like it's crazy because I wasn't necessarily worried, but it was about to get real crazy when we started seeing these things. Like I published the thing about the ESL Pro League term sheet, which was saying like you couldn't be in any other leagues that were longer than X amount, and you couldn't go to play in any other league longer than this amount while you're playing in Pro League and all these things. And then Valve kind of cut all that short. But if that hadn't have happened, which knowing Valve, like it could have easily have been the case, they just stay hands off like they always do. Then yeah, like I was kind of worried for a bit, because then we would have been, some teams would have been forced to pick and choose, and then it's like the top teams would only been able to play each other, at majors or more than anything else, like very rarely other than that. So thankfully that happened a bit on that front, but I still think indirectly, these organizers are going to find a way to force people to pick and choose, just not directly, and try to see what they can get away with when it comes to Valve. So I don't know. I sense like a divide coming, because especially with the rumors of some sort of franchise league coming. And I always knew eventually it was going to be tried, as long as it was allowed. It was eventually going to happen in one way or another. But yeah, I still sense somewhat of a divide coming, because you have all these people who are pro franchise and want a guaranteed return on their investment that they're putting towards their teams, and then you have the other side who enjoy the open element of it, and maybe they're just much better at branding their teams and getting sponsors for their teams, so they're not feeling the heat nearly as much and don't need that guaranteed return. But I just hope that the leagues don't, the way they work out, I'm talking in 2020 and beyond, don't force a divide to where we don't get to see the matchups we like to see. That's what I'm worried about most. It's just the health of the product we see on a regular basis. That's my biggest worry, I guess.
Yeah, and it's very interesting because we saw in on the term sheet story that you put out, and I think just in general it was pretty much understood. I mean, a lot of people were kind of just openly talking about it, that these leagues that were coming out, the revamped ECS, the new look ESL circuit with Intel in there,
Mm-hmm.
it looked, it was pretty clear right from the get go you were going to have to sign up exclusively. And
Yeah.
honestly, I was in the mindset where, okay, on the one hand, I've talked about this for a while. I think unless we get something in the scene that's going to make all this content we're going to have unique, I think we're always in that risk where it becomes a little bit blasé. It's the same shit. The season's too long. People lose interest. You've got to be very careful about that. But that being said, I've always stood up against exclusivity, and Valve came out and pretty much said that, keep in mind, this was the plan. It was in the term sheets. And then Valve just came out and released a statement on exclusivity. I was bringing it up while we were talking, where they said, recently there have been steps toward a broad form of exclusivity where teams who compete in a particular event are restricted from attending another operator's events. This form of team exclusivity is an experiment that could cause long-term damage. In addition to preventing other operators from competing, exclusivity prevents other events from keeping the CSGO ecosystem functioning if an individual event fails. At this time, we are not interested in providing licenses for events that restrict participating teams from attending other events. So in other words, these leagues cannot happen without Valve's approval, and Valve are going to look at the term sheet, and if there's any exclusivity in there, get fucked. You're not getting a license. So these grand plans and grand designs that these leagues had, it's pretty much all come collapsing down just with one blog post.
Yeah, it's like I said, I'm thankful it got to that point, because I too myself, I don't like the idea of exclusivity at all, because that kind of just, like I mentioned, it separates teams from being able to play each other, some of the legendary matchups from happening. And so even though I still think, just based on history, that these people will try their best to work around that any way they can and try to see what they can get away with. And I hope that doesn't result in, like you said, just super long leagues just for the sake of blocking out parts of the calendar and preventing teams from playing other places. I hope that isn't the result. It's that would be just as bad in a sense. So I'm glad the Valve took that stand, and if it was my report or just general other people reaching out to them and letting them know about it, whatever it was, it doesn't matter. I'm happy that they said something and did it quickly and kind of nipped it in the bud. But
first time I've seen them do that in a while. Actually,
I know,
ahead of
right?
some shit,
That's
right?
why I'm saying like it totally. I could have seen a world where they don't do anything, right? Because that's their forte, is to just let things play out. So that's why I'm extremely thankful that at least said something, because we could have went down a dark road to where maybe it could have done damage that was kind of irreparable, at least for a while.
Yeah, and keep in mind as well, I mean, it's one of these models where it wasn't just one league that was talking about doing this.
No.
It was going to be ECS. It was going to be this Blast league that we don't even know
Yep.
what's going on there yet. I don't even think they do. Weird stuff going on over at Refresh where they made their Twitter protected for like a few days, and I'm hearing all sorts of crazy rumblings over in that neck of the woods. And obviously ESL, who dominate 80% of the calendar anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So you would have been left with not just, okay, you have all the best NA teams in one league and the okay-ish European ones over there with them, and then you have all the best in Europe and the okay-ish ones in NA over this one, and then maybe they can work it out and get it together where they compete openly in a few tournaments on the. It was going to be like literally, you had to pick who your paymaster was going to be, and you would only play in their tournaments. That was that.
Yep.
And to think about what that would do to Counter-Strike as we understand it, and it could be only, had Valve let this one slide, it could have been only at the majors.
Yep.
You would have saw Astralis play, a Fnatic or or a Team Liquid. It was really that possible, just depending on who was offering the most money.
Yeah, definitely. And like as something too, like it kind of gets overlooked, I think, also mainly because fans don't care. But with ESL owning such a large part of the calendar, it doesn't mean that by default they're doing well as a company or that things are good. Like I don't think people realize that financially, like if you look at the way they're publicly traded and all that, they haven't been doing that well. So I don't know if like their plans initially with that term sheet and everything they're going to be doing was a way that they would guarantee some health as far as themselves financially. But I also wonder how this can have an impact on them, because they have, things don't look that great, and you've all also seen how much of an impact their changes have had an effect on DreamHack, because it's the same parent company. So there's a lot of things, there's a lot of like residual things that impact this could have, of not allowing exclusivity in a way that because they were promising revenue share and all that, not to every team but to some in that term sheet. So it's I wonder if this somehow might have a deeper effect on ESL, although they still do have the support that comes from Intel and all that for their other events. So I wonder how it might change things long term outside of their marquee events, and what they're able to do in Counter-Strike. And maybe it opens up the calendar in a way that we haven't seen before. But I guess probably too early to tell.
Yeah, and the other thing they chimed in about, of course, was this, conflict of interest and multiple team ownership, and this is another thing that, again, it's not a problem that's gone away. What happens is people do this. They treat it with the attitude of it's better to ask forgiveness than ask permission. They go and do the bad thing that everybody can see is objectively bad. They do it, and then they go, oh, but there were no rules, so come on. How are we supposed to figure out that a basic conflict of interest issue that anybody in the world in any other area other than esports would understand would also apply here? How could we possibly have known? and then they slowly walk it back, and everyone has to give them time. And then they go, oh, okay, and that gives them time to set up the shell companies, and they hide this and they hide that, and they give shares to friends and friendly people, and it's a farce, frankly. But we did stand up to it, and we did resist it, and we did say enough's enough, and a lot of it went away. Again, mostly talking about refresh, but they weren't the first, and they won't be the last. I think it's good that Valve are taking a very kind of clear stance on it now and saying you cannot own a share or have any financial relationship between teams that are participating in tournaments, and we expect that to kind of be the norm if you're a tournament operator, because I think it's gone on for too long where people are like, oh, this only applies to the major, and no, this has to apply industry wide, or we're getting ourselves into some very dark territory.
Yeah, I was particularly excited about them mentioning this almost more than anything else when it came to that release, because it was almost like a call to action for someone like myself, I felt, because they had mentioned in there, like, okay, before an event, we expect, people to disclose any kind of conflicts of interest that may be present, and your plan to essentially get rid of them, and what you'll do about it. And I personally, I mentioned at the time on my stream, I don't expect anyone to act in good faith. Maybe some, but for the most part, I don't expect some of these people who I know have fingers in multiple pies to just rock up to Valve and say, "Hey, there's this interest there, but we're actively, getting rid of it. Don't worry about it." So to me, it felt like almost like a call to action for people like yourself, if you even have the time, and people like myself too, and others, if they find interest in it, to like, if I find something, I'm going to make sure Valve knows. I'm not going to trust that these orgs or these people, whoever, are going to act in good faith, because really they haven't, and they've done everything they can to get away with what they have thus far, or make it look like they're not in multiple areas, but they are. And if I see a team or two teams that I think might have financial interests that's shared in through anything, I'm gonna say something about it. And so I just felt that, for myself more than anything, it felt like, oh, here's something directly that I can help with, and that's why I'm excited about that part more than anything else, because there's not very many people, because the community doesn't care about conflict of interest. Like, you've talked about it, I've talked about it, and maybe a couple other people for the past 2 or 3 years everyone else just doesn't really care. As long as it's not directly affecting them, and as long as they can still watch their Counter-Strike, then no one really cares, sadly. And so I'm just glad that now we have, from a power higher than ourselves, or someone else bigger than us, saying that, okay, this isn't allowed. The rule maker, essentially, that now I feel like, if we start talking about it, it's going to have more relevance, and people are actually, at least people still won't care, but at least there's a rule now.
At least we got a rule, and that's the key thing. And I think rules, when you codify something, I think it does encourage the community to be kind of vigilant and mindful of it, even if it's in a real cynical, pathetic kind of gotcha kind of way, where they just want to get a team they don't like in trouble, or an organizer. If there are people out there that dig into this shit by themselves, who just aren't journalists. They're just like, social media, like guru freak types, with like, they know where to find this stuff, and they do, and it leaks out. I mean, some of those people are like my sources, for example. They'll hit you up and be like, listen, I stay glued to all these like filings in Swedish law, business law or whatever. Look at this, and I just happen to find it, and that's the starting point where I'll go, do some digging. So it's I think it's good that Valve have finally recognized a few mistakes. I almost think as well, and I'm sorry to bring it up again, because everyone is probably played out with this shit. I almost think that there was an acknowledgement that the way they handled the whole broadcasting rights thing was so shitty, they didn't want to put themselves in that position again. And it was like, listen, we're putting out a blog addressing that, but let's at least get ahead of this other bullshit, so we don't get too much negative heat from the community.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I myself obviously was disappointed with that too. So yeah, I think they kept that in mind when they put that all out together at once. I don't know if they would go to as far as to admit that they handled it wrong, but I know that they knew that a good amount of the community and some prominent people would definitely not agree with the way they handled it, and also not appreciate why it's so much different than the way Dota operates. I mean, you can already make an argument for the game itself why it's treated so much differently than Dota, but just at least for the broadcast rights too, I find it still confusing at this point. Why it differs, but yeah, I'm willing to take, appreciate the good parts of what they said and what they jumped in front of. So I'll take what I can get from Valve anytime I can.
Yeah, when they do pop their head around the corner, it's usually reassuring, makes us think we haven't been forgotten about, like TF2 or whatever Artifact or whatever fucking games. It's kind of going fallow in the Steam catalog. So we are reaching that critical point where we've been yakking away for an hour. So I wanna just hit you up and basically get a few thoughts on kind of what you're looking forward to next in terms of maybe some breaking news, a big story that's going to come in the scene or something that's going to play out. Basically something that you're paying close attention to that you think is going to have like a profound impact on the community.
I would say nothing directly imminent. But there are things that now that, so like I mentioned at the beginning, having the ability, we're almost 3 months now, I've been doing this full time, just the ability to pursue leads that I didn't have. Like I just couldn't. Like people would come to me and I would just say like, look, I'd love to look into this, but if I promise you that I'm gonna look into this, I'm probably lying to you, because there aren't enough hours in the day for the free time I get to do this outside of my work and the reporting. So I've just had the ability to be able to look into things more. There are things that I've had in the pipeline for a while that I'm still just trying to get enough information for, things to do with China and match fixing and physical threats and all that kind of stuff. There's juicy stuff about that I've been trying to work on to get out at some point. So if I can, that's definitely something I think would be huge and probably the biggest story I ever put out. But as you know, there is no guarantee when it comes to that stuff. So it's things like that. Other things, like one of my favorite, and normally my favorites are the ones that don't get a lot of attention, but like when I did the stuff about the Quantum Bellator Fire and how they were treated, there's still some figureheads there that are kind of mixing with the Forza guys who are kind of dealing with the same thing right now, and I'm kind of in the middle of that at the moment. So nothing super profound, at the moment, but that's okay. I don't care if it changes the landscape or anything like that, as long as people are being helped and I'm enjoying it. That's all I need. Other than that, yeah, just more content and working on the things that I finally have time for more than anything else.
So let's talk about that content then. Obviously, I think this is a good area to kind of drum up some people to go over and start following you on your Twitch channel, and are you committing to like a regular streaming schedule? Does your work permit that right now?
I do have some other projects like outside of esports and stuff that I'm still working on, just that I'm personally interested in, but also kind of allow me to not. One of my favorite things that I've always been able to do when I was working, and I'm going to try to continue, is I've enjoyed, and I'm thankful that I now live in a time, and that I got into esports at a time where I don't have, like, I can make an income from it, but I also take pride in the fact that I haven't had to rely on it, because even though I trust my own judgment, I like that I don't have to rely on it for an income stream, and that doesn't mean no one else should if they can't do that. But I have some other projects that I work on just to make sure that I don't have to rely on things. And then that kind of has kept it to where I can't have like a regular schedule, but I'm kind of working more towards it as I find the content I enjoy doing and the content people like to watch. I have more and more people asking me like, hey, you should play games and stuff too and stream more often. So I'm entertaining that thought, but for the most part, it's just a couple days a week, 2 to 3 days a week for a few hours, answering questions and breaking down stuff and correcting, incorrectly reported stories, things like that. But yeah, it's pretty much just sporadic for the moment. But as I kind of work my schedule, and I think as we get into the new year, I'll kind of iron things out to where it could be a more regular thing. But other than that, yeah, it's just whenever I can find the time and a good opportunity more than anything else.
Yeah, well, it's super easy to find your Twitch channel. It's just twitch.tv/DK. You've got good branding. I never remember if they put that on the
Oh
overlays
yeah,
on the rivalry one. So just want to
pretty
make
easy
sure
to find.
Yeah, pretty
it's
easy
on
to
the screen
find.
if you get.
Yeah, good. Just checking, Sam. I'm glad you're here to keep me on the straight and narrow. But look, as always, dude, it's been a pleasure to catch up with you. I don't know when I'll next be at an event or on the road, but as I say to everybody, if you're ever in Vegas, there's always a hearth and
You'll
a
be the
fridge
first
full of
stop,
beer.
man.
Yeah, glad to hear it, buddy. And there you have it. That's DK, well, actually is the leading CS journalist that we have, nominated for an esports award, as he absolutely should be. And fingers crossed that he's going to get his recognition, as far as I'm concerned. So that is the latest interview in the Rivalry CS channel. I hope you've enjoyed it. As always, I've been Richard Lewis. Make sure you go and support Rivalry as well. You can head on over to rivalry.com. You get a free $25 bet on esports events, in the sense that if you fuck it up and you don't pick a winner, don't worry, they give you the $25 back, because they're just nice like that. Make sure you're over 18. Make sure you're betting responsibly. It's that adherence to such ethical guidelines that makes me want to work with them. They're a truly awesome sponsor, and I'm blessed to have them in my corner. So make sure you also, if you're new, what is it they do on YouTube, Sam? Is it they follow, subscribe? Yeah, subscribe, like, hit the bell. You have to do about fucking 5 different things now. Make sure you do that. And we will see you next time. Until then, guys, take care of yourselves.